For years, there was this thing in crypto that was almost too good to be true, a high-yield savings account that blew traditional banks out of the water. Then, in 2026, Washington, D.C. stepped in to shut it all down. But what looked like a straight-up attack on crypto might have actually been the best thing that ever happened to it. So let's break down how that could possibly be true. Okay, first, you gotta understand why this was such a huge deal for so many people. I mean, look at this. On one side, you've got your regular old bank, maybe giving you, 0.4% on your savings if you're lucky. And on the other side, crypto platforms were offering 10 times that, around 4%, just for holding digital dollars or stablecoins. It really wasn't a hard choice, This was crypto's killer app. But this amazing feature created a huge, unintended problem. Economists started calling it lazy capital. Billions and billions of dollars just poured into these stablecoin accounts, and then it just sat there, earning yield. The money wasn't being used for payments, it wasn't funding new projects, it was just parked. And that started making regulators and central bankers really, really nervous. So you might be asking, how was this even possible? How could they offer such high yields? Well, it all came down to a really clever workaround in the law, a legal loophole that, without anyone really noticing at first, created this whole new kind of shadow banking system. So here's how the magic trick actually worked. It was a pretty simple four-step process. First, a stablecoin company like Circle would take your dollars and buy super safe stuff like US Treasury bills, which earn interest. Then, they'd share some of that interest money with a platform, say like Coinbase. Step 3, Coinbase passes a chunk of that money onto you. But, and this is the crucial part, they called it rewards. So you, the user, got this awesome high yield, and the issuer never directly paid you interest, which a law called the Genius Act had already made illegal. See? A loophole. And this quote from the American Action Forum really gets you inside the government's head on this. They basically said, look, the incentive to use interest to pull money into stablecoins is obvious. We should have seen that they could do the exact same thing without technically calling it interest. So from their point of view, the new laws weren't an attack. They were just closing a loophole they felt they should have caught the first come around. And that brings us right to the heart of the conflict, Washington's fear of something called deposit flight. They didn't just see these high-yield stablecoin accounts as a neat crypto product. No, they saw them as an existential threat to the entire traditional banking system. And the numbers they were looking at were just staggering. The Kansas City Fed put out a report that projected a potential $325 billion reduction in U.S. bank loans if the stablecoin trend kept growing. We're talking about the money that fuels everything from small businesses to home mortgages. All of a sudden, this niche crypto product was being talked about as a major threat to the U.S. economy. And it wasn't just the government either. You had respected consumer watchdogs like Consumer Reports sounding the alarm. They pointed out that these things looked and felt exactly like a savings account, but they had none of the protections like FDIC insurance. So if something went wrong, you could lose everything. That was a massive risk, not just for individuals, but for the whole financial system. So naturally, the legislative wheels in D.C. started turning. First up, in July 2025, the Genius Act banned the issuers from paying out yield. But that left the rewards loophole wide open for the platforms. So by March 2026, the Clarity Act was introduced specifically to slam that second loophole shut, setting the stage for a huge political showdown. And this brings us right to the big change, the moment everything shifted. The Clarity Act's main goal was to ban these passive rewards, officially marking the end of that easy, set-it-and-forget-it yield that drew so many people into the crypto world. But, and I can't stress this enough, this is the most important part of the entire story. The law didn't actually ban all yield. It made a very specific and, frankly, brilliant distinction. It banned yield from passive holding, from just letting your money sit there, but it explicitly allowed yield that came from active participation. And that one little distinction, it changed everything. This table really breaks it down perfectly. So the casual holder, right? The person just parking some digital dollars on an exchange, yeah, their yield went straight to zero. But for the more active folks, it was a totally different story. The DeFi lender using a protocol like Aave, or the person providing liquidity to a decentralized exchange, they were pretty much unaffected. And why? Because they were all actively doing something, lending, providing liquidity, taking on some actual economic risk. The law protected them. And this simple change created this powerful new dynamic. All that lazy capital we talked about before, well, it couldn't be lazy anymore. If that money wanted to earn a return, it had to get up and do something. All of a sudden, capital had to become restless. So what do you do with all this restless capital? Well, it basically split into three main paths. The first is to transact, to use stablecoins for what they were always meant to be, digital cash for payments. The second is to deploy, use them as super efficient collateral for trading and other financial activities. And the third option? Migrate. Move deeper into the world of DeFi, where active participation is literally the name of the game. And here's the really surprising outcome of it all. The ban didn't kill stablecoins, not even close. It forced them to evolve. They had to stop being a digital savings account and start becoming the digital gas needed to actually fuel a new global economy. I mean, this really sums up the whole shift. In the old world, stablecoins were becoming a stagnant store of value, trapping all this capital. In the new world, they're forced to become what they were always supposed to be: frictionless digital cash. Money that's designed to move, to be used, and to fuel commerce all over the planet. And look, this isn't just some theory. This utility rebirth is already happening. Visa and MasterCard, they're building out huge networks so merchants can accept stablecoin payments. Companies like Ruvo are using stablecoins to let people in Brazil send and receive US dollars in an instant. And get this, over half of Gen Z already owns crypto. They are the digital native consumers who are going to expect this kind of thing. And you have to see the scale of this. Even before this whole regulatory shift, back in 2024, stablecoins processed $5.5 trillion in transactions. That is more than 3 times what PayPal did. Now, it's still behind a behemoth like Visa, but it just shows you that stablecoins were already a massive force in global payments. And now, they're being pushed even harder down that path. What's really fascinating is when you put the US approach side by side with China's. While the US banned passive yield to protect its banks and force capital to get active, China did the complete opposite. They're mandating that banks must pay interest on their digital yuan, specifically to drive people to use it. It's like we're watching two totally competing philosophies of money play out on a global stage. And that brings us right back to the central question, doesn't it? U.S. regulators started all of this to protect the traditional banking system. But by forcing billions of dollars of lazy capital off the sidelines and into a new, active digital economy, you just have to wonder, did they accidentally end up accelerating the very system they were trying to contain?